Hi everyone, I am Luisa Geisler. I am an MA candidate in Portuguese in the Department of Portuguese and Spanish here at UNM. And today I would like to share with you a bit of my ongoing research on literary representations of the Amazon. The working title seems to be The Green Hell I Call Home, but don't worry, I don't think the presentation is that dramatic, but let's get this going because time is of the essence. Um, Basically, today we're going to talk a little bit about the Amazon itself, a few literary references we can see from late 19th century until today. Those were very specifically selected for the presentation today. We'll take a look at what one of the authors I've been studying calls The Empire Writes Back. So the Amazon is writing about itself, which is way more interesting than white people writing about the Amazon, colonizers writing about the Amazon. A few current representations, like from the last 10, 15 years. Why should you care? I know the question comes a little late, but I think it's of interest anyways. And our imaginaries today, a little bit of a conclusion, a few further readings. Basically, the Amazon is 60% located in Brazil. I would like you to take a look at this map very seriously because look at the amount of countries Brazil has a border with and how big the Amazon is. Of course, it is not all about rainforest. There are people living in cities and a very interesting dynamic happening there. So it's not all jungle. And you notice the big difference from the difference between like going from the Amazon to the extreme south, like close to Argentina, for instance. It is the largest concentration of plant diversity in the world, largest hydrographic basin on the planet. Approximately 33 million people live in it, including 1.6 million indigenous people. Of course, other cool things you can find in the Amazon are rubber, cacao, wood, Brazil nut, soybeans. You can destroy the rainforest and plant some soy. You can destroy the rainforest and get some cattle going. And most specifically mining for iron, gold, manganese. So this has caused a lot of exploitation to happen in the Amazon throughout the years and throughout its history, and has marked its history with slavery and destruction. And until this day, this is a pattern that's very present. Even though this is not a presentation on the Amazon, all of those things are in its history. We begin, people from the West, or like the Western civilization, begins talking about the Amazon through travel literature. And we already begin having projections of what we think the Amazon is, but with the point of view of the discoverer, of course. So we have comparisons with Eden, already a religious understanding from the Bible. We have the name the Amazon comes from the Amazonian warriors. Carvajal at some point thought he saw some Amazonian warriors, decided, well, this is the land of the Amazons, even though that's a Greek myth. In Brazil, meanwhile, we get also people from more urban parts of the country writing about the Amazon and taking its symbolism as a way of talking about the Republic. Brazil is a very young republic around the 19th century, and it begins using the people from the Amazon, but not all peoples of the Amazon, of course, only the people that fit a certain profile. The good natives, of course, are the national heroes. They become the national heroes, and a way of expressing how these pure people who live without sin are the actual symbol of the Brazilian nation, ignoring all other natives that would not fit in this profile. As simultaneously, internationally, you have Jules Verne writing The Giant Raft, writing 800 Leagues of the on the Amazon. That's the same book with different translations. Arthur Conan Doyle in 1912 writes the book that will inspire Jurassic Park in the future. That is the book that it's set in the Amazon, and that says that in the Amazon, deep within the jungle, there is a moment lost in time. Let's pay attention to that. A moment that does not reflect current time, where time hasn't passed, where there are a bunch of dinosaur and crazy creatures. Ironically, this book is not accurate, it's not accurate in I'm sorry. It's not accurate in chronology, but it's not accurate in dinosaur science as well. This book, like all the references it makes, have been debunked, many of them. Meanwhile, we move forward to the 40s, and we begin seeing state propaganda about the Amazon, which is not so much literary, but is a way of building a mindset about the Amazon, a way of thinking about the Amazon. We have Brazil's first dictator, well, arguably the first dictator, not arguable. But he begins doing something called a Marcha para o Oeste. So that is the march to the West. That means he is doing politics for population of the area and economic incentives to building that, because allegedly, according to Getúlio Vargas, there isn't anybody living there. And of course, there are no white people living there. There's a bunch of resources that are just laying there. We should just use them. At the same time, we have World War II, and the rubber booms have been happening. That's a different presentation. I cannot go into that. Otherwise, my time will just blow up. We have a classic that happens in the Amazon in 1953. It's called Los Pasos Perdidos, the famous Cuban writer Alejo Carpentier. And it tells of a man who goes into the Amazon and finds himself in a more authentic version of himself, in search of that and kind of finding that as well. So you see how some stories keep being told, even though we were talking about an authentic self in 1800s, we're here 100 years later still telling the same story. Just a minute. Okay. Now we get to the 1960s, and again we're looking at state propaganda. Now Brazil is under a military dictatorship. Revista Manchete, so Manchete magazine, that is the first image on the left, is one of the most important magazines of the country, and especially think of a country before the internet. So it's showing this amazing road being built. This road would cross the entire Amazon. It's going to be amazing. It's called Transamazônica, so Trans-Amazonic Highway. Ironically, it was never finished. You see more state propaganda saying, so the middle picture says, Inferno Verde já era, so the green hell is gone. And the last picture on the right says, the Amazon is gone. It's a picture, it's an ad for a navigation company of some sort. And so basically what they're saying is the Amazon is this bunch of jungle and it's gone because now progress is here. Thankfully, at the same time, around the 70s, we begin seeing the green movement happening, especially because this very accelerated exploration of the Amazon does not go by unnoticed. And similarly, we begin seeing a few authors that not only write about the Amazon, that not only are from the Amazon, because there have always been writers in the Amazon, of course, but they have finally reached the national discourse in Brazil. That's very, very important. That is a shift. And specifically, the author I look at the most is called Milton Hatton. And he writes in very interesting angles about the Amazon, specifically talking about Lebanese immigration in the Amazon. And he manages to be awarded nationally. He's translated internationally. You can find his books in English. He's adapted into movies. And one of the authors we study have this sort of essays that are called The Empire Writes Back. So the Amazon is no longer being written about, it is telling its own story, and that's very interesting. One of the other post-colonial authors we look at, she talks about a bit about how the subaltern, how this person that's seen as lower speaks, but there is a big importance in also being heard. So that's the big shift. Not only the writing, but this change of dynamic of being heard. A few other books written by Amazonian writers, native writers, Ideas to Postpone the End of the World, The Falling Sky. Those are books that are available in English, so if you want to look them up, they are available. They're great. However, we still got some very common representations that are just like the ones we mentioned a minute ago. So the Lost City of Z is literally about the lost world not being lost. The Green Inferno is about cannibal natives. Anaconda is about how the jungle will eat you up with its giant snakes. Jungle as well. Those are movies. I think the most recent is Jungle from 2017. Green Inferno from 2011. Anaconda is from 97, if I'm not mistaken. Why should you care, though? I think that's the big question too. Why are we talking about this? But those recurring narratives that were originated literarily, they create the narratives we have now. This narrative of mystery, of exotic, of secrecy, of magic, all of that is still recurring. Sebastião Salgado, for instance, the famous photographer, he's been to Brazil millions of times. He gave this interview in September saying how the native communities, so that's the big quote right there, as comunidades indígenas, so the native communities are the man before the original sun. It's literally a trope we were just talking about. This has not changed. This is an argument from Twitter. Jair Bolsonaro, Brazil's current president, also likes to get into Twitter wars. And this is one type of argument that Bolsonaro has, that the Amazon has to be explored because it's so much resource and it's the key to Brazil's development. It's not. And it's also possible there is a sustainable option somewhere in there. But much of the rhetoric we just looked at from the Brazilian dictatorship especially is the same rhetoric we see today in Brazil. We have these recurring narratives where we see the people that are in the Amazon as other, a kind of magic, kind of different from me, impossible to understand, of course, as well as these dichotomies, this hell versus paradise of eternal money, etc. And what would be the middle ground in these narratives? That's the main, I think, the pressing question from the research. What would be the middle ground from these narratives? Where is the middle between the dichotomies? Or is there a middle ground? Or should we just ignore them completely? This is the basic focus and the point my research is in right now. If you would like to read it further, this is part of my bibliography as well as the books I've listed throughout the presentation. And I strongly recommend, if you are minimally interested by this topic, I would strongly recommend taking Portuguese 514, Professor Jessica Carey Webb. This is where the research began. So there's plenty of resource if you want to understand the Amazon beyond just a bunch of jungle where people go and lose their minds. Thank you so much for your time.